Test.
Yeah, I'm operational. Check, check, check.
Test.
Those are Rose glasses? Oh, yeah? Oh, cool. He just gave it to you? Cool. All right. Whenever you want to start, Susie. Sure.
Okay. Good afternoon. I'm going to call the meeting to order. I think it's 6:44, more or less. First item would be the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand.
The roll call.
I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You may be seated. The next item would be the approval of the minutes, and
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes. There's a couple of errors that I mentioned, and I gave it to the clerk, but everything else is correct.
I second.
okay, there's a motion. It was seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. Hearing none opposed, the motion carries. Next item would be public comments. Don't know if we have
No.
general public comments online or...
Online, Chairman Julia, we don't have any public comments. Sir, are you here for public comments?
I believe he's here for one of the specific items that we're going to be discussing ordinances-wise. So even though I think on the agenda, those items are put as quasi-judicial, I really don't think that they're quasi-judicial.
They're not quasi-judicial.
Right, but
Sure.
the public will be able to,
If you allow them, they can speak when the item is presented. Sure.
I think that would be probably better, so that way the town can present there, and then you could have any questions you may have.
And Chairman, if you allow me, just for purposes of the record, let me state that for roll call purposes, I see all the board members here with the exception of Board Member Fernandez, so I just want to state that for the record.
Perfect.
Okay? Thank
Yes.
you.
In light of that, I know the gentleman is here for one of the items, I wanted to, if it's okay with my board members, to reshuffle a little bit the items A through E and start off basically from the bottom up, go foreclosure, the golf cart, and then up, so that we could do the foreclosure first. So I'd like to make a motion to reshuffle those items.
I'll second the motion.
The motion was made, the seconded. All those who are in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. Hearing none opposed, the motion carries. So the first item that we're going to be discussing would be the foreclosure and VPO ordinance.
This item is an ordinance of the Town of Miami Lakes, Florida, amending Chapter 16, creating Article 4 to be entitled Registration of Foreclosure Mortgage Properties and Vacant Properties, providing for purpose, intent, and applicability of the ordinance, requiring the registration and maintenance of certain real properties by the mortgagees and vacant properties by the owners, providing for penalties and enforcement, as well as the regulation, limitation, and reduction of registrable real property within the town, providing for severability, repealer, codification, and an effective date.
So the town would like to make their presentation, and then we'll hear from the public.
Chair, I'm going to invite Mr. Tony to come up to the podium, and I'm just going to give a brief explanation. So the genesis of this item was, I believe in November of last year, Councilman Dieguez had a brief presentation, and the gentleman's before you gave a presentation to the town council, and the town council asked us to work in conjunction to come up with this ordinance. And basically what this ordinance does is the following. When properties come into they're affected by foreclosure, a lis pendens is filed, the bank is proceeding with proceedings against them, there is the opportunity that some of these properties may fall into disrepair. The owner may abandon the property, may leave the property, may try to gut the property, and so the idea is that the banks would register with the town, and after they register with the town and provide a registration, we would be able to communicate with the bank and provide them with a criteria of how to maintain that property, and basically then be able to have a mechanism by where code enforcement, if there's an issue, can go ahead directly to the bank and resolve those issues, and if not, there's certain penalties. This is a program that Mr. Tony's firm, Breakpoint Law, has been working with different cities and administers a program for different cities, and he's going to explain a little bit about more in detail as far as the program's concerned and as far as his involvement with the program if the town of Miami Lakes adopts it.
You
I don't
gotta
know
turn
if
on the
that's
mic. You turn it on.
And please
Can you hear me now?
please
Okay.
state your name and address for the record.
Sure. So my name is Tony Figueroa. My address is 16161 Southwest 138 Terrace, Miami, Florida 33196. Good evening, board members. It's a pleasure being here. Thank you again for shuffling this to the top of the agenda. So, but essentially, you know, Mr. Correa gave a great overview of what this ordinance is about. Essentially, when properties are foreclosed by a bank, by a creditor, what this ordinance would do is it would make them register that property with the town, with the municipality itself. So it would make them give contact information to the town, make them pay a registration fee. Depending on the ordinance, it could be annual or semi-annual, and the town would set that fee accordingly. And so the purpose of it really is to give the town a contact in order to reach out to the bank, the creditor. If the property is in disrepair, make sure that the bank is paying to keep up repairs on that property so it doesn't fall on taxpayers. So the brunt of this doesn't fall on the municipality figuring out where in the budget they need to dip into and pay for something that in reality the bank should be paying for, the creditor. At the same time, it also acts as a public safety component where, unfortunately, many instances there are unsecured pools. People go into an abandoned property. They're doing things that they shouldn't be doing, and nobody knows who to reach out to. Can't just call 1-800 Bank of America and say, hey, you know, you guys probably foreclosed on this property. Did you? You guys want to pay your fee? It doesn't really work that way. So what this does is, as Mr. Kobe has said, there's a registration portal that this would also create. It provides easy access for town administrators to see who owns that property, how to reach out to them, who's the appropriate contact, making sure that they pay their registration fee. And that's essentially what this ordinance entails. So happy to answer any questions from the board.
Questions from the board? I mean, I have some.
I have some.
Go ahead.
If they don't pay the registration fee and the foreclosure goes through and it's less than what is owed in the actual foreclosure, how does the town get paid?
So that is something that, you know, in our experience we've encountered where, you know, an ordinance is put in place and then it's difficult to enforce. That is something only that attorneys can do. As Mr. Kobe mentioned, the firm I work for, Breakpoint Law, as attorneys, we have assisted other municipalities in the registration side of things, but also the enforcement side of things. So that's something that only attorneys can do. No other firm can do that unless, you know, they have lawyers that can carry this out. So normally that there are ways, especially lined out in the ordinance, where it would go to a special magistrate hearing, and so the attorney representing the town would go to those hearings. Many times our firm has done that, or other cities that have the ordinance, their own attorney would go to a special magistrate hearing or code enforcement hearing. They'd enforce the ordinance. They'd show them a list of any violations or anything owed by the bank. And so through that way, through that mechanism, that is how the ordinance would be enforced, and the town will be able to collect on what is owed from the bank.
But the question here is, if, say, the registration fee is $100 or $200, in order to chase that money by attorney, it's going to cost a lot more.
Board Member De La Sierra, if you could speak into the mic so we can hear you.
I said if the
Thank you.
registration fee is $100 or $200, I don't know what it's going to be, and they don't pay, and there's no surplus in the foreclosure sale, so there's no money there. The bank doesn't pay, it's going to cost way more than $200 fee, $300 fee to the town to try to chase that, so they would, in effect, lose the money.
Right. So if the bank decides not to pay, there are fines and penalties associated with not paying. So also described in the ordinance, depending on how the town will want to carry it out. It could be a daily fee or a monthly fee or penalty that's associated with that. So it wouldn't just be say a $250 semi-annual registration fee. And if they decide not to pay it, then, you know, we're only chasing $250. There would be fines and penalties associated with that that would accrue over time. And we have also experienced, based off past case law in Florida, where municipalities can in fact collect in arrears any penalties and fees that are owed by the banks.
Okay.
A question to clarify. So, we don't have such vehicle in the town right now to require such registration of foreclosures?
Not
Nobody has to say anything to the town to,
okay. So currently, if a bank commences foreclosures or completes the foreclosures and takes over the bank, or there's a judicial sale, there's no mechanism currently that requires them to register that property with the town or notify the town of that change of ownership.
my next question is, what kind of safeguards are in place or will be in place? As you know, people get greedy, and knowing that such and such property may be in foreclosure, somebody may get the urge to, maybe buying it, that is part of the town or, part of this whole, town process. Is there gonna be any safeguards, to prevent that kind of thing, or? Because obviously, the people that work here in the town will have an advantage over, I mean, a lot of people are after foreclosure properties because they can get a bargain or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So what kind of safeguard will be in place to prevent that?
You're talking about insider information or
Right.
insider advantage.
Exactly.
I mean, any information with regards to this registration is going to be a public document. It's going to be something that's going to be available to anyone at any point in time. Somebody wants it, do a public records request, you're going to get your full list of all the foreclosure properties. So what kind of advantage would someone that is handling that list versus someone that has to ask for it as a public records request have? Could there be some? Maybe there's some. I'm not sure that it's anything great. I would say, though, that on a day-to-day basis, I mean, the town of staffers and officials, Susanna, gets insider information as to new businesses coming into town and things going on with distressed properties and things that, yes, obviously, if the town wanted to or if a staffer wanted to, could inappropriately use that information for their own self-gain, right? That's improper. That's unethical. And I think if something like that were to happen, and I know of certain instances I can't talk about where things like that have happened and the employee has been dismissed. I mean, it's been some serious issues, but the employee has been dismissed. 'Cause I don't think that
there are
that would be
safeguards.
tolerated.
There are safeguards that.
Sure. I mean,
could
that you would know about. I mean, you get a list and all of a sudden you have an employee that's buying this property and you're able to figure out, hey, look, it's this person who's purchasing and they're a person that's privy to this information. So obviously that's not something that I think management or the town would tolerate.
Okay, thank you.
If I may,
Once the lis pendens is filed, everybody knows.
Right.
And
That's in the
the lis
business.
pendens will be filed prior to them filing anything with the town, as far as that's concerned. So it's already public record once the lis pendens is filed.
Well, so yes, but I think couple things. So I think what board member Senras is saying is that you've got a nice cozy list of all these banks and all these properties.
The contact information.
It's exactly, so you've got the contact information, it's kind of easy, oh, here we go, let's start negotiating, versus having to go inside and look and do your own research. At the end of the day, you're right, if you want to find the information, you're going to find the information. It's public. Is it a little bit more troublesome having to go research it versus having a nice little list? Sure, I get that. The one concept, though, that I'm going to talk a little bit about, and maybe we can beat up a little bit here, is the idea of when this gets triggered. And I guess the way that this ordinance, that you have it now, it gets, the registration gets triggered at the point of lis pendens, which is the initial phase of the complaint. So the bank is serving the complaint, is putting the lis pendens, they've got to come to the town and register.
That is correct.
But have you seen other, and I'm going to ask a question because I'm going to ask another question for some of these board members that have asked me. Is there a way that the triggering event could be order of summary judgment or final order?
That is something I would have to look into detail with CJ, the founder of the firm, who essentially, helped design past ordinances for other municipalities similar to this one. So, if the board would allow me, to get back to you guys on that, on a response for that question.
The thing is,
I have a
in
question.
my experience with that situation is there could be a huge gap between the filing of the lis pendens and summary judgment. So you're going to have a property, potentially speaking, for a substantial amount of time.
Good point.
And is
Vice
it,
Chairman.
If I
Yeah,
can.
Vice Chairman.
And here was my question about that. So, two things. When a lis pendens is filed, which happens, and there still would be a redemption, I'm going to use that word, and I don't mean it in the legal sense, but in a time frame where a property owner could recover their property, let's say. So, if the fee was $500 and that was added on to the expenses, so once you're in arrears in your mortgage, it triggers all kinds of things once the lis pendens is filed. The bank is going to order a broker's opinion of value. A number of legal fees are starting to occur. And you would have then a registration fee of $500. So let's just say, hypothetically, I'm a 70-year-old senior, and I had COVID, or I was ill for a number of months, and I fell behind on my mortgage payments. Typically, at the 90-day mark, that triggers a lis pendens. Am I right? I think that's correct.
I believe so.
But I still want to keep my property, and all of a sudden, I owed 3 months, let's say it's $3,000, and suddenly the $3,000 goes to $10,000 because of the expenses that have occurred. So by delaying the registration process, first of all, the bank doesn't own the property at that point, right? Still in the property owners has the rightful control of that property. In that rare situation, quite frankly, foreclosures in Miami Lakes right now are a rare situation. But in that little window of opportunity, even $500 could make a huge difference in someone being able to recoup their property. So many other municipalities, City of Miami, City of Hollywood, all kinds of cities have vacant property registrations. And there's a few things that are ambiguous about them, because there's a difference between being vacant and being foreclosed, right? So there, when I read this, there's not a lot of differential there. So by triggering it down the line at summary judgment or final judgment or even sale, a bank can't even pull a permit on a property, and I know because I've tried, until they actually have a certificate of title. Even a certificate of sale doesn't allow you to do that. So there's that gap or that window where the bank really doesn't have any authority. They do and they don't, right? Because once the property has been fallen behind, or if it's in repair, they have rights to step in. But the mechanism where it's triggered by the lis pendens, when you're watching how the foreclosure calendar is going, particularly during COVID, when it really wasn't, and now it's starting up again, there still would be, especially in this market, an opportunity for someone to recover that home, but an additional fee like $500 to the 70-year-old little old lady who's trying to keep her home could be a lot of money. Could be that window. I'm not really sure what the fine line is where that comes into play.
Yeah, and I understand your concern. So the way the ordinance is designed also is to go only after the creditors. So it's not an imposition on current residents. It's not designed to ever go after residents who are in their home.
That's not what the ordinance says, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, but whoever's registrable includes anyone. Part B says 30 days vacant, which means I could take a 31-day vacation, and I'm technically registrable. And it also says, or any cancellation of utility service. If you're late a week, that's a cancellation. I don't think you qualify that in any way. And I think that the spirit of what you're doing is good. I think the purpose is really for maintenance of property that's already qualifies for that, right? So what we're talking about is maintaining a property, and like my fellow board members said, in this town, maybe we don't have as many foreclosures, but there are homes that are vacant. There are homes that have been abandoned. There are homes that absolutely everyone who's neighboring to that home would like to see maintenance on it. However, there are fundamental issues with additional stringent requirements that come along with that, which is I have a vacant property, I'm gone for 60 days, my house is paid in full, but you're making me abide by additional rule requirements, and you're allowing anybody to come on my property. Immunity is granted to this person, so I don't know what they're going to do on my property, but you've granted them full immunity. Not limited to trespass, you're granting them full immunity. I appreciate the spirit of it, but I do have some issues. And my other issue is, at the beginning you said enforcement only goes through attorneys or through your firm. So my mind is triggered to, well, obviously there's an incentive or a bias there on your side, respectfully, because this translates to business that only you and your firm can do. So I like the purpose, which is there should be some sort of regulation when a property is already up for having issues. I think the law already has liens. You're not creating the liens. You're not going to give stricter liens. If we can't make them pay those liens, if someone doesn't have money, you could stack up the liens from here to tomorrow. You're not going to get a dime. You're not going to get a dime. You'll get a judgment, but that judgment is monetarily not worth anything until that person has something where you could pull that money from. In the meantime, there's payment for these people. I mean, these people are not going to work for free. They have to come on the property, they have to maintain, and there's a database that has to be maintained with information regarding everyone who has a foreclosure or is vacant, which is really my bigger problem, because whoever goes into foreclosure, it's going to be out there anyways. The list pendants is going to be out there anyways. The liens, I mean, liens are going to be placed. These vacant homes have liens. The problem is what I feel like this is overreaching a little bit. I think that subsection B of what's a registered property, I think is a huge issue, because a property that is vacant for more than 30 days, there's nothing else other than I can be out of my house for 30 days and you could register me and I could be fully compliant and you could, or any cancellation of utility service. You don't qualify that by a time frame. So a person can be sick, a person can be in the hospital, a person could be in a European vacation and decide that, you know what, I don't really need cable service or AC during that time. And I just feel like that possibly could have been qualified a little better. And I do think, just to add one more point, there is inconsistencies regarding one time frame. So if you go under section 1655, you said any owner of a vacant property as defined in this chapter located within the town within 10 days after the property becomes vacant, but over here you said 30. So I believe there needs to be the kind of ordinance that's here. I do believe that. I believe that I have, at least myself, my board members can certainly, fellow board members will certainly state their own, but I do have an issue with how you define registrable property, because this is not about who's in foreclosure, what are we going to do. This is about issuing additional penalties for people who don't maintain properties that are registered under A and B. And I have an issue with B. And as an addition, in A, property sold to non-related bona fide purchaser. Why does it have to be a non-related bona fide purchaser? Why can't it just be a bona fide purchaser?
So I appreciate the concerns you've brought up and those what you've pointed out. We're happy to work with the municipality on any revisions according to the needs of the town. I'm sorry, as to the question you asked, could you repeat that once more?
The last one was, it states that the designation of a foreclosure property as registrable shall remain in place, meaning this property is in foreclosure, it's registrable for me to go and tell you, you have to cut your grass, you have to have this, there has to have shutters, you can't turn off plumbing. I mean, that's really what this is about. This is about you're getting foreclosed on, you can't make payments on it, or it's vacant. You can't let the grass grow, you can't let the roof fall, you can't let the pipes burst. I don't disagree with that. However, I think when you say the designation shall maintain in place until such time as a property is sold to a non-related bona fide purchaser, and I'm not sure why it has to be, and that may be a real estate requirement, but that was just one other thing that was brought to my attention.
I think typically what they're looking for when you manage these kinds of properties, oftentimes you're not allowed to purchase. Some of the contracts even have that language. So it's an arm's length relationship.
Okay, in an arm. And then obviously I have a huge issue with B, and my last concern is the enforceability. And you said, well, what we're really not going to get $200 and really you're only gonna do it if it's an attorney or a firm, and I take, you know, that was something that kind of perked me a little bit.
Okay, yeah, and just, on that last point, right now, just happy to introduce this to the board, the ordinance itself. But the actual enforcement action, it's something that can be carried out by a municipality in and of itself. The selling of the service, that's, later down the road. I mean, of course, if the municipality would want to engage. But, first and foremost, just wanting to introduce the ordinance itself and having this exchange right now where, any revisions as needed by the board can be done. But just mention that point, stating that because there are other organizations that would say that we can do registration, but they can't do enforcement because
Maybe my point is being missed. My question to you is, obviously, if you have something in place, the town has to be able to resolve the problem without litigation, I guess is my point. And if the town wants to further a purpose, which is, our intention is to keep the town looking a certain way. We certainly don't want an eyesore. That depreciates, surrounding homes is value, and it's nothing nobody here wants to look at. That being said, the town has to be able to have a tool to ensure that compliance without going to a law firm and spending the money to recoup $200 at a rate of however per hour. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I understand. And, again, just to reiterate it, it is something that many municipalities already carried out with their own internal administrations. Any attorneys that might come up and say, well, we would do this at a certain hour. This is all contingency based, but again, that's, not here to sell the service, just bringing up the ordinance itself. And it is something that the administrators can't do.
I know how it works, but we need, what's lacking in the ordinance is the ability, in my opinion, the ability for the town to enforce it. If the town deems to have litigation, they could certainly handle that, but the town needs a tool to enforce what the town needs, which is maintenance of vacant and abandoned properties, because we don't want this eyesore for those reasons. The spirit of it, which is you have to maintain your property. People fall upon a foreclosure, people vacate their property, but you have to maintain. There should be a certain level of requirement that we have in this town, because there are certain homes, and I could throw the lien. I could have thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of liens, but we're never going to see the money.
If I can interject here
Yeah.
for a second, I'm looking at the different sections here. Section 1660, additional authority. 1661, opposing, obstructing enforcement code officer, and I guess all these can be tweaked, but at the end of the day, what the code is basically saying is that first of all, the bank's got to register, right? Once a bank is registered, it's basically putting the onus that would be otherwise on the owner of the property on the bank to ensure compliance with our code. So it's going to be the code enforcement officer, not the law office, not myself, who's going to go out there and is going to cite the property based on our code. Nothing special. The only thing is that instead of going to the owner, now it's the bank who has a responsibility to ensure compliance with the town code. So what CJ's firm offers, and that's correct, that's a separate conversation altogether, is, well, the collection process of the bank and making sure that the bank is registering and that whole maintenance of it. That's a separate conversation altogether. But what is the enforcement of the town code is not CJ, it's not even me, it's our code enforcement officers. Now, folks who do get, and the bank, in this case, if the bank does get a citation, they do have the right to appeal it, and the right to appeal it is the same as anybody else. They come before the code enforcement magistrate, and at that point,